Welcome to the Safety Committee University and the next important training module in this series. It is my pleasure to introduce to you today Patti McGuire. Patti is the Southern Oregon Regional Safety and Health Supervisor for SAIF Corporation. She has been with SAIF since November of 2013, and she supervises safety consultants and works with employers from Eugene throughout Southwest Oregon to improve safety and health programs and reduce injuries. Previously, she was the manager of occupational health and safety for Harry and David, overseeing safety and health programs for multiple facilities and 50-plus retail stores nationwide. Patti is an Oregon native and has an AS degree in business administration and accounting. However, she was drawn to the field of human resources early in her career. She also spent 5 years working in human resources in the wood products manufacturing and 15 years in retail, in district and store level operations. Patti will be presenting today the foundational module in the Safety Committee University, Safety Committee 101, Roles and Responsibilities. Please help me welcome Patti McGuire.
Hi, everybody. My name is Patti McGuire. I'm Regional Health and Safety Supervisor at SAIF Corporation, and I'm happy to be part of the Safety Committee University partnership between the Southern Oregon chapter of ASSP and Oregon OSHA. At ASSP this year, we've really struggled in not being able to plan and hold our annual conference in Ashland, and so we're bringing you the Safety Committee University as a replacement so that we can still be making sure that we're doing everything we can to help support the safety community in Oregon and specifically the safety committee members, since they make up the majority of the people that attend our conference. And of the work that I do at SAIF, working with different businesses, probably the safety committee work is my most favorite. I love spending time with safety committees and watching them grow and learn and evaluate their safety program for improvement. So I'm honored to be part of this and to host today Safety Committee 101, Roles and Responsibilities. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about the OSHA requirements for safety committees and safety meetings. And as you all probably know already, OSHA requirements are really what we consider to be the bare minimum. So if you're happy passing school with a C or a D, then that's all you want to do. But I know that that is probably not what you're interested in because you're here today becoming trained in safety committee information. So we're going to spend a lot of time talking about best practices. Also, if you've been on the committee for a while, or maybe if you know how your committee has been running and things have gotten stagnant, whether it means that people aren't turning in reports of hazards, maybe management isn't receiving any recommendations from the safety committee, then it's a good time to think about how can we breathe more life and energy into our safety committee. So we're going to be talking about that as we kind of wind up today as well. So anybody that was familiar with the workers' comp system back in prior to the late 80s and early 90s, most people didn't have a very good experience. It didn't matter if it was someone that had been hurt on the job or if it was an actual employer trying to administer workers' compensation claims. But our system was pretty broken. We were the sixth most expensive state in the US at that time for workers' comp premiums. And so what we started to see was there was definitely a rise in premium. There was a rise in claims costs. There were more injuries, serious injuries and fatalities. And so labor management and the government got together and decided that it was time to do some reform to try to get things under control. So a big part of the cost element was the fact that injuries were happening. So there was a huge focus, not just on improving the workers' comp system, but also efforts to reduce injuries. And so Oregon OSHA was a really big part of that, as was implementation of safety committees. So this is, I'll be honest with you here, I don't often use a PowerPoint for this training. I usually hand out the OARs and go through these with employees, and you can see the OAR there quoted at the bottom of the screen. And the reason that I do it that way is because I really like the safety committee members to have an opportunity to read a regulation and to understand that they're not scary, they're not difficult to understand, they're really pretty easy. And so that way they can be seen as a resource when somebody is looking for information around OSHA requirements. But what it says in there is it talks about how you satisfy this rule. So employers are required to establish either a safety committee or hold safety meetings to communicate and evaluate safety and health issues. And on the first page of this rule, I'll show it to you again, there's a little chart there, and it kind of makes it confusing as far as how do we satisfy this rule. But I think OSHA kind of does that on purpose, maybe. Don't tell my friends at OSHA that. But I think they really want everybody to have safety committees because they are much more effective. But based on your size, based on how many people that you have reporting to construction sites or working mobile or doing office work, there is some small businesses that are able to satisfy this rule by just having safety meetings. But today we're going to focus on safety committees. So what I really like about this rule is how it opens. It talks about what the purpose is. And so I like to just pretty much quote that. And the purpose of safety committees and safety meetings is to bring workers and management together in a cooperative, non-adversarial effort to promote safety and health and to assist you in making continuous improvement to your safety and health programs. So the recognition is that the safety committees are a huge part of improving safety and health programs and reducing injuries at businesses. And a lot of that is because of their role. And really, as a safety committee, you're kind of the communication liaison in between the employees and in between management, and kind of create that system of check and balances as far as management is accountable to the safety committee. And we'll talk more about recommendations later. So the first one we're going to talk about is how many people need to be on the safety committee. So what the rule says is that if you have 20 or fewer employees, you need to have at least 2 committee members. And if you have more than 20, then you need to have at least 4. And again, that is just a bare minimum. And what we do know is that more hands make light work. So please don't feel like you're limited to how many members that you can have. You could have too many, but you should be able to get a pretty good feel for having the right number on your committee. Now, when we talk about who's on your committee, the other thing you want to think about is having the right type of people on your committee. You want to have people that are really approachable to their peers, that are great communicators, because communication, as I just mentioned, is a really important part. It should be bringing safety concerns from the people they represent and be able to discuss them creatively and logically within the safety committee. So you want to make sure that you have someone that is really interested in making a positive change, that is willing to do the work and show up, and somebody that is wanting to engage during the meeting. So that piece is really important. I remember back in the old days, I'm not going to date myself here, but I remember a couple of places that I worked when I was pretty young, that the people on the safety committee were selected because they had actually had an on-the-job injury, which does not make for a very positive experience. So make sure that that is not something that is happening at your location. So now we want to talk about how people are selected to be on the committee. And I've heard people in the past say, you know, it should be 50% hourly and 50% salaried. And they're kind of on the right track, but not. It's not about how you're paid, it's about how you're picked. So if I am a safety coordinator at a business and part of my job description is to be on the safety committee, I'm what's called employer selected. So management has designated me to be on the committee, regardless of how I'm paid. So our other members are what we call employee elected or volunteer. So you have someone that volunteers to represent their department or someone that is elected by their peers. And so there should be a 50-50 blend. You can be heavy on employee elected as long as management is okay with it. Typically they are. And actually, I was reading in the National Safety Council article one time talking about the traits of companies that have strong safety programs. And one of them was about having a safety committee that is driven more by employee elected or volunteer members. And they have actually linked that to having lower incident rates as well. So it's definitely a best practice. So before we dig into more of the rule, I want to talk a little bit about what people's roles are in the committee. So you should be giving this some thought as far as having a couple different roles. You want to at least have a chairperson, and you can have a vice chair. Those people are the ones that are making sure that there's a place to meet, that the notice goes out, there's an agenda for the meeting, they're setting the schedule, and then they actually do the meeting facilitation. Now, a nice thing about having a vice chair is that not only do you have somebody to step in if the chairperson is not available or not at work, it is also a way to groom somebody to be a chairperson if they're not 100% comfortable doing it right off the bat. So that's kind of a best practice to keep in your back pocket. Then you also want to have somebody that's going to be taking the minutes. So whether you call them a secretary or recorder or a record keeper, because it is nearly impossible for a chairperson to be able to facilitate the meeting and take accurate and good minutes. So those roles really should be separated. So that person would not only make the records, they would be distributing them out to the other members. They would be the ones that sent them out to employees once they're approved and ready to go, and should be reporting back on the status of recommendations. And then we'll talk more too about what all of the responsibilities are for safety committee members, but basically need to be able to and willing to attend meetings, should be reporting unsafe conditions and practices, be prepared to discuss incidents and accidents that are occurring in their areas, and should be making contributions to discussion on how to make improvements around our safety and health program. And then the last two are really important because we need to remember as safety committee members, we're role models. And so we should be the first one following safety rules. And we also should be out there working to influence people in a positive way to do their job safely as well. So once we have our people on the committee, then let's talk about what they must do. So the first thing is that there must be a majority agreement on a chairperson. So you do want to make sure, especially if it's a management selected person, that there's a vote recorded, because I will tell you, Oregon OSHA, if they were to come in and do an inspection, they will kind of raise an eyebrow to that if there's a management selected person serving as chairperson. So you want to make sure that that is recorded in the minutes that it was voted on. And the other thing you want to be really careful of too is new committees, oftentimes it's a management selected person that kind of chairs the committee and gets it up and running. But at some point you want to be able to pass the baton on to an employee elected member, volunteer member, because it really helps grow the safety champions on your committee. And it also prevents the committee from relying too much on a member of management to be running the committee. I've seen that happen over time. Then you want to think about what kind of tenure or terms that you're going to have. So OSHA says you have to have at least a 1-year minimum term when possible. Granted, some people come and go, change departments. So there doesn't have to be, I guess every committee is different. And that's one thing I recognize. So I worked at Harry and David prior to SAIF, and we had 10 different safety committees, and every committee did something a little bit different. So you do have to figure out what works best for you. And I'll give you a couple examples. So we had one committee that didn't really have any term limits, and they had several people that had served on the committee for a long period of time, but then they would make sure that they still changed things up and added new members on a yearly basis here and there. We had another committee that had a 1-year term, and they would cycle off half the committee in January and the other half in July. That way you didn't have the whole entire committee changing out. However, if one of the committee members was interested in running for chairperson, they would be allowed to stay on for a second year. So you just have to figure out what's best for you. So the next thing is committee members need to be paid at their regular rate of pay anytime they're involved in doing safety committee activities, whether it's attending the meeting, conducting inspections, or participating in any root cause analysis. So that's very important. Next item is you are required to be trained in both incident analysis and hazard identification. And that is because those are the two biggest things that you do, are your quarterly inspections and your analysis of root cause analysis that's being done potentially by other people. So you need to have those tools and be able to do them well. You also need to be provided with meeting minutes. So, and you can do that in different ways. Some committees will review the minutes at the next meeting and vote on them and approve them. You can also do that electronically immediately following the meeting so that you can get the minutes out to your employees faster. It's whatever works for you. The safety committee members also must represent the major activities of the business. So you want to be keeping in mind the different departments that you have, if you have different shifts. And it doesn't mean that you need to have one person from every department, because you may have some departments that have only just a couple people in them, but there still needs to be somebody that they know represents them, that is their go-to person. And when it comes to our training, you want to make sure that your new members are trained as soon as possible. And there's many different ways that you can do the training. You can, if you're SAIF insured, you can have your SAIF person help you. We also have an online learning platform. OSHA has safety committee training, both classroom workshops and have online as well. You can even do an in-house training as far as having all your material all ready to go and to do it yourself. So there's just a lot of different options. And if you do have people that are on the committee for longer than a year, best practice is to train them at least every other year so that they get that refresher training. So how often should the safety committee meet? Well, it depends on the type of work you do. So if you do mostly office work, OSHA says that you can meet quarterly, on a quarterly basis. If you do not do mostly office work, you need to meet monthly. They do give you an exception that the months in which you do the quarterly walkthroughs, you can skip your safety committee meeting. It's not a best practice, of course, because our best practice would be to meet all 12 months and to have 4 quarterly inspections. However, you can use that little exemption to get you through maybe seasonal times in your business when you're really busy. I worked in retail for years, and we would always skip December and do the quarterly inspection that month so we could focus on customer service. So that is an option for you. So let's talk about written records. So if we didn't put it in writing, it didn't happen, right? I know you've all heard that before. You've had HR people probably drum that into your head. But if OSHA shows up to do an inspection at your site, the first thing that they're going to ask for, in addition to your OSHA 300 log, if you're required to keep one, is they're going to ask for your safety committee and safety meeting documentation. So they are going to go through it. They are going to look for your minutes through your quarterly inspections, and they use that information along with the OSHA log to kind of set the stage for their inspection. So it's really important that we reflect the work that we're doing with our safety committees in those minutes. And so what we need to have in writing is who attended, what the date was, all the safety and health issues that were discussed. We need to include any recommendations that we've made for corrective action, a date that we would like a management response, who's responsible for following up. And they want a lot of specifics around the actual hazard itself, the tools, any fixes, that kind of thing. So make sure you put a fair amount of detail into your minutes. And also any other reports. So if you are emailing recommendations to management, you'd want to make sure that you had those in writing as well in your quarterly inspection. So you really want to make sure you're organized. You know, you could even have everything in a binder and on the front page a spreadsheet showing that you've checked off the minutes for each month or the inspections for each quarter. And especially if you have multiple locations, multiple committees, you want to make sure that you have a really good tracking system, because you're not going to have a lot of time to get all that stuff together if they come on site. They're going to want it pretty immediately. So let's talk about the meat of what the safety committee does. So the inspections, as I mentioned before, is a really big piece of safety committee duties. And so it's up to you to work with management to actually establish what your procedures are going to be for conducting the safety and health inspections. So who's going to be on the team? What kind of form are you going to use? What is going to be our system for follow-up and tracking on the items that we find? Those are all things that are within your purview. Now, as far as when you do them, you need to do them quarterly for all of your physical locations, unless it's a site that you don't visit, that employees don't visit often. And then it's up to the committee to determine how frequently that needs to be accessed. So let's say that you had an offsite building where you store heavy equipment that you only use during the winter time. It would be reasonable to think you'd want to inspect it the quarter before it's going to be accessed by the employees, the quarter that it is being used or that it's finished being used by employees. So, but that's up to the committee to make those decisions. So as far as the inspections, anybody that does participate in the inspection team has to be trained in hazard identification. And the reason that that is specifically put in there is because you can include people outside of the safety committee to be on the inspection team. And that's actually a best practice, whether it's a supervisor of the area that you're inspecting, or maybe you want to take a different approach and have someone from another department come along. It's also a good practice to have maintenance or a facilities person with you, because a lot of times that they are part of whatever solution is going to be implemented. So having their opinions and their buy-in on the front side can be really helpful and help things get done faster. And then it's up to you guys again to develop procedures on reviewing those inspection reports and making recommendations. Because ideally, what will happen is once you find things during a quarterly inspection, there should be a fair amount of things that the committee itself or the members have the authority to go ahead and get fixed. So once you circle back in your next safety committee meeting, then you're going to want to be going over the items that are outstanding that still need to be addressed. So there needs to be some sort of process in place for that. And you want to make sure too, and whoever delivers your safety committee training on hazard identification, I'm sure we'll discuss this as well, but you want to make sure you're not just focusing on physical hazards, but you're also looking at how work is getting done. So whether it's the work procedures that are being used, safety behaviors, and ergonomics, that kind of thing. So just learn to have really wide eyes when you go on those inspections. So further role of the safety committee is to look at what is our process for investigating incidents. And I hate the word investigation. Unfortunately, it's still in the OSHA rule, but the rest of us in the world like to say analyze because it just has a nicer sound to it. But it's up to you also to work with management to develop the procedures for how that's going to play out. So what I usually recommend to safety committees when I deliver the incident analysis training is that it's a really good time to evaluate what is our injury reporting policy. Is it accurate? Is it what really lives in the real world? And is it adequate? Or is it time to maybe update it and make some changes? And then discuss, who is involved in this process. Typically what I see is it's the supervisors that receive the incident report are the ones that do the analysis. But you can always pull in a safety committee member or mix it up and have an incident analysis team. There's different ways to do that. So just be open-minded and think about maybe how you could make some improvements. I worked with one safety committee that was it's a really great roofing company, and their challenge is that they don't have a lot of incidents. So when one happens, they feel like they're not real great at incident analysis. So what I recommended for them to do is to pair up. And so they have two of them pairing up and doing it together. So it just creates some dialogue. And so when we see a situation where it's the supervisor doing the root cause analysis, that is perfectly fine, because at the least the safety committee's job is to actually evaluate those incident investigations and make sure that the analysis was thorough, make sure there's no outstanding questions or information that wasn't collected, to review the recommendations and make sure that they feel like they're adequate. Because sometimes the safety committee, since it's a broader group of people, may come up with some more effective recommendations. So that is what you'd want to do. So make sure, though, that if you are reviewing those reports within the committee, the actual reports themselves, any names should be redacted. Probably the quick and easiest way, if you have a lot of reports, is actually keep them on a spreadsheet, and that way the worker's name can be hidden and then be printed out. And one of the committees that I worked with at Harry David, I really liked what they did. They would actually circulate the list of incidents prior to the meeting so that each committee member could come prepared to discuss the incidents that occurred in their areas. And so I really liked that. Another committee that I work with, it's a city municipality. They actually invite the supervisor of the people that had incidents for the month, and they really focus on the ones that turned into workers' comp claims. They have the supervisor come and present all the information to the safety committee, and then the safety committee can ask questions and talk through recommendations. So it's a really high functioning safety committee, and I really like that they do that. So outside of the hazard identification and incident analysis responsibilities, it's also up to the safety committee to develop a system for people to report hazards and make suggestions. Now, years ago, I was on an OSHA consultation visit with a business that I work with. I learned so much. I was able to join along and learn so much. And so the OSHA gentleman, when we got to this part, he was asking them, "What is your system?" And I said, "Well, I'd like to know, this is pretty vague what it says in the rule. So what are the rules?" Because I'd always, I've worked for businesses where, during an orientation, new employee orientation, they tell you to report to your supervisor, or they tell you who your safety committee member is, or there's always the um, safety suggestion lockbox. And I've seen all of them work sometimes, and some of them not work at all. And I remember when I worked in retail, we had a lot of turnover in our management teams because a lot of people were being promoted. And we had one manager that came on staff that was put in charge of the safety committee. And he's like, "Oh, we need to check the safety suggestion box." And nobody could find the key. And when we finally cut the lock off of it, there was a suggestion in the box that was joined by a lot of cobwebs and dust, but it was about 4 years old. So OSHA's response, though, to me was perfect. What he said to me was basically, if your committee is not getting any suggestions, whatever system you have isn't working, which I thought was a great answer. So what I tell safety committees when I do this training is to make sure that if a committee member is bringing something to the meeting to discuss that was given to them by another employee, is to document that in the minutes. And that way, when OSHA reads through them, it'll be clear that the system that you have is working. Okay, so other responsibilities of our safety committee is to make the meeting minutes available to all employees. So, I know a lot of people are going paperless and doing electronic with putting things in shared drives or emailing them out. But if you still have a time clock that people are having to hover by waiting to clock in, they're pretty likely to read what's posted around them. So continuing to post it at the time clock can be a very effective way as well. And then this last item here, a lot of people aren't aware of that it's actually one of the safety committee's jobs is to evaluate management's accountability system related to safety and health issues. Um, and to give you an example of this, when I worked at Harry David, we had a department, and of course we did a lot of seasonal hiring. Most people probably know that. And so we had this one department that was starting to have an increasing number of people that were coming to work on the second shift that were being flagged for reasonable suspicion, so for being under the influence of alcohol and or drugs. And so the safety committee had a discussion around that. And so they actually made a recommendation to it was actually to the department I worked, Occupational Health and Safety, because we were the ones that owned the drug testing program, made a recommendation that we look at the number of people that are random tested, because the employees that were not safety sensitive, I think it was like a 1 in 10 random or something like that. So they recommended that we random 3 out of 10. So that's a perfect example. Also, if there's a safety incentive program, it would be within the safety committee's realm to be able to evaluate it and make recommendations. If there's any consideration that the incentive program is discouraging reporting, that is a no-no. And OSHA has actually taken a stance on that and considers that to be retaliatory. So if there is a program like that, it would be within the safety committee's role to go ahead and make a recommendation to change the safety incentive program. So as far as how often you do that, it's kind of, they say best practice is maybe every other year, but you could do it annually if you wanted to. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about some things that you can do on an annual basis as well. So some businesses, if you have multiple locations, may have what's called a central safety committee. So we see this a lot in school districts where you have, maybe have 10 to 12 schools scattered across a geographic area, or with our city and county governments where we have many, many different departments doing different things at different locations. And so it can be challenging to try to have a safety committee at every single location. So what they do is they have one committee with one representative from each location. And so when that happens, there's actually more requirements for the safety committee from OSHA, recognizing that it's a little bit more of a diluted effort to improve the safety and health program. And so what they need to do is need to have a written policy that basically verbalizes management's commitment to the committee, that it requires and describes what is effective employee involvement. It describes how the company is going to hold both employees and management accountable for safety and health hazards at their location. It also needs to get pretty specific on the methods for identifying and correcting safety and health hazards at each location. And then there's also an annual review. So you need to have a written comprehensive review of the committee's activities to determine that the committee is actually being effective. So kind of, in the beginning, I talked about how the safety committee's kind of a check and balance for management as they're accountable to the committee. Well, when you have a central safety committee, it works in both directions. So the central safety committee is accountable to management to make sure that they're doing an effective job. And it was on the previous slide, but I also want to say too, because I actually experienced this at one of the central safety committees that I work with. This one business had shared with me that one of their separate locations actually had their own safety committee, and they had made marvelous reductions in their injuries as a result, but they still need to be represented on the central safety committee. So just kind of a side note there. So let's talk about how to energize your safety committee. So at the end of this presentation, I've got a link for you to a flyer at SAIF.com. The great thing about SAIF.com is that you don't have to have a login or be a SAIF policyholder to access any of our safety and health resources. But there is a flyer on how to energize your safety committee. I was fortunate enough when I first started at SAIF to get to help put this together. What I will tell you about it is there's some really meaty things on there that are some pretty meaningful things that get work done, and there's kind of some fluffy stuff on there. And so it's whatever works for you. I'm less about fluff and more about work, but I've seen great committees do some pretty creative and fluffy things that create a lot of excitement and energy with the employees. So just do what feels right for your culture. One of the things that I really like is the idea of creating a vision statement or even a mission statement. And it's really cool. I'm part of the Klamath Safety Group. I helped put that group together a couple years ago with some of the other safety leaders in the Klamath Falls community. And that was one of the things that we did is we created a mission statement. And it was really neat to feel like we all had a hand in crafting it and being able to share with what we thought our purpose was. So this can be a really great thing to do. So just keep it short and simple. Make sure you include everybody in it, and it should be something that's easy to remember and really catches on with people. Also, if you like the idea of having a lot of structure around your safety committee, you can even develop a charter, and there are templates for these available. Oregon OSHA has them, I know. So just talking about what is our purpose, talking about what each person's responsibilities are. You can mention term limits. You can talk about how the election happens, the votes, and all sorts of different things. So it just depends on how complex or how simple you want it to be. So that can be something that's meaningful as well. One of the things that I really like also as far as meaningful activities is creating a plan. And so having maybe one meeting annually, and if it was me, I probably would want to do it in January, so at the end, or maybe even February, so at the end of the calendar year, after our OSHA log is done, so we could have a chance to review the OSHA 300 log, identify any trends that are happening, and then make some plans around that. So whether or not it's planning out training that we want to see delivered to employees, maybe it's training that we want to receive as a safety committee. I knew one safety committee that they would have speakers come in and do like 15-minute tailgates trainings, and then the safety committee members were expected to go out and deliver the same material to their department. So it was almost like a train the trainer, a mini train the trainer class. But anyway, there's just a lot of different things that you could put on there. And then having that chance, just having that chance to be strategic and look back and evaluate last year, what worked, what needs to work better, and then what can we do, and just making a plan and sticking to it. That can be a really meaningful thing. And make sure you put the conference on there because hopefully it will be happening next year. Also bringing in other people, I kind of already mentioned that, but looking for different opportunities. You know, we have our conference, we have, and I see I didn't edit that slide to say ASSP, I do apologize. But we have monthly ASSP meetings. Right now they're virtually online. It's the first Tuesday of every month. People can log in as early as I think 11:30 or 11:45, and then we have a speaker. The Redwood Safety Association has the same thing on the first Thursday of every month. And so making sure that you're taking advantage of those learnings and also of the networking, because the networking that happens within our safety committee or community continues to astonish me. We have such a warm safety community and everybody is so willing to help each other. And so just make sure that you take advantage of that. Also, if you have any type of trucking operation, the Oregon Trucking Association, they usually have quarterly, they call them the Safety Management Council meetings. Right now, they've switched everything to webinars, and there are so many webinars out there right now. And the thing that I think is so cool about them is they're really up to date and they're current regarding, you know, the current state that we're living in. So there's a lot of good information out there, and just take advantage of any educational opportunity that you can. There's also a lot of online stuff as well. And of course, hopefully at some point we'll be doing in-person things too. And then think about maybe there's some things that safety committee members can be doing to sharpen their safety committee skills within the business and also help with the safety and health program. So if you have job hazard analysis, JHAs, JSAs, there's a lot of different interchangeable words for those. But if you're in the process of writing them, you know, it'd be great to involve a safety committee member, or if they need to be reviewed, having them review them. Having them review any any programs, any written programs that are required to be reviewed on an annual basis, you know, bloodborne pathogen, your exposure control plan, lockout tagout, those could be great things to help with. Also, we already talked about assisting with incident analysis or participating in a new employee safety orientation. That can be really helpful too. And because what we're doing is we're growing safety champions, and that's the beautiful thing about turnover on a safety committee is growing safety champions. It's almost like recycling more safety aficionados out into the workplace. So just finding ways that you can get involved and assist with the safety and health efforts. And then you might want to ask yourselves, well, how do we get employees engaged with our safety committee? Because we have a tendency to be very passionate as safety professionals or safety committee members, but we want other people to develop that same kind of passion. And so inviting maybe guests into the safety committee, you could also ask people to participate on an inspection and of course get them their training. You could ask for assistance with root cause analysis, but it really is potentially inspiring people to take more of an interest in safety. And it may even give them an interest in serving on the safety committee at some point. So it could be a way that you could almost kind of groom people to become involved with the safety committee. And it's just good overall for the workplace and reducing injuries and improving morale as well. And so we're going to kind of wrap up here. And these are some links that I told you I'd be passing along. The first two are from Oregon OSHA. The first one is the rule that I showed you on safety committees and safety meetings. And then there's a landing page for safety committees and safety meetings. And if you're not familiar with the Oregon OSHA website, it's really easy to navigate. It has a topic index, A to Z topic index. And so every topic has a landing page where you can find all of the rules. You can find any publication that's related to it, any posters. And I just do encourage you to get familiar with that. And if you are wanting to read any of the OSHA rules, make sure too that you go to the program directives and read those as well. So the program directives, they look kind of official and weird, but it's a way for Oregon OSHA to provide interpretation of the rule based on questions they've received from employers and businesses and employees without having to go through all the bureaucracy of actually rewriting the rule. So it's a really good place to look to kind of fill in the gaps if you don't feel like your question is being directly answered by reading the rule. Then the second link is to SAIF.com. So we actually have a lot of different resources there. So I gave you a couple different ones. One is a resource guide, and I think you'll find it very helpful. Within that resource guide, there's a lot of links embedded to different training and to templates for minutes and quarterly inspections and things like that. So it's a great place to look as well. And then the last one is the actual 10 ways to energize your safety committee that I shared with you. So I just want to say too that I just commend you for being on the safety committee and devoting your time to attending Safety Committee University. The job that you do is so very important to your workplace, to yourself even, and to your coworkers, as far as finding ways to keep people from getting hurt. And years ago, I worked at a manufacturing plant, and they were struggling when they hired me, related to not just injuries, but just overall morale and culture. And one of the first things that we decided to do was to re-energize the safety committee. So we got it back on its feet as far as getting active members that were willing to participate, provided them all the training that they needed to do their job and the support that they needed to do their job as well. And over time, it was amazing the difference that it made, not just in reducing injuries, because I believe we reduced injuries by 45% within just a couple years, and costs about 65%, which relates to severity of injury. But it also made a huge difference with morale company-wide. And because when people know that you want to do something to keep them from getting hurt and you're willing to respond when things happen to correct hazards, it speaks volumes about your commitment to them. And so just keep up the good work, and please don't be afraid to reach out if there's ever anything that you need, whether it's to me or to other members, ASSP. We're all in this together, and we're here if you need anything. So I hope you enjoy the next two sessions of Safety Committee University, and hope you have a great, safe, and healthy day. Thank you.